Good morning, dear students. I am Bharti Kathuria Sehgal from the SD Vidya School. We are continuing with the chapter number 18, Body Fluids and Circulation. Today, we are going to discuss the structure of heart. So, let's start. In this video, we'll be discussing what are the functions of heart, the different layers present in the heart and the functions of these layers, the different chambers of heart, and the function of the valves of the heart. Now, first of all, we must know where is the heart located. So, in the previous chapter also, we discussed that heart is located in the thoracic cavity, or in general language, we call it as the chest cavity. It is located between the two lungs, as we discussed, towards slightly towards the left side. So, we discussed about the cardiac notch, which is formed in the left lung due to the presence of the heart in between the two lungs. It is present posterior to the sternum. Sternum, which is the central bone in the rib cage. So it is present at the back of the sternum. It is present superior to the diaphragm. So diaphragm is the muscular organ which separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. So it is present superior to this diaphragm. The tip of the heart is called as the apex. Now, heart has anatomically three layers. We have generally discussed only about the pericardium. Now, we'll be discussing about the other two layers also, which are endocardium and myocardium. Now, pericardium, which is the outermost layer, as you can see, it is further comprised of two layers, as you can see here, which is the parietal pericardium and the visceral pericardium. In between the two is present the pericardial cavity. Inner to it is present a very thick layer called as the myocardium. Further inside is present the innermost layer called as the endocardium. The heart consists of four chambers. Two atria, that is right atrium and left atrium, and two ventricles, right ventricle and left ventricle. There are four valves. The mitral valve, also called as the bicuspid valve, the aortic valve, the tricuspid valve, and the pulmonary valve. Now let's discuss about the functions of these different parts of the heart. Now first of all, the function of heart itself. Heart is the pump which pumps the oxygen and nutrient-rich blood to the organs, tissues, and cells of the body and eliminates the waste products. Now, heart is a very important part of the circulatory system. The circulatory system in human beings consists of three main parts: blood, heart, and blood vessels. So far, we have discussed about blood, and now we are going to discuss about heart. Now, blood is carried from the heart to the organs through arteries. Arteries are the blood vessels which carry blood away from the heart. They are comparatively thick-walled and deep-seated. Arterioles and capillaries are further branched from the arteries. Blood returns to the heart through venules and veins. Veins are thinner as compared to arteries. They have valves present in them to prevent the backflow. In addition to this, veins are usually superficial. So the ones that you see in your wrist or on your hand, the blue colored pipelines that you see of blood are the veins. So everything that is injected intravenously is actually injected into the veins of your body. Now, pericardium. I told you pericardium consists of two main layers, which is the parietal pericardium and the visceral pericardium. In between the two is present the pericardial cavity, in which is present the pericardial fluid. The pericardial fluid, like we discussed in the case of lungs also, there is a pleural fluid which is filled between the pleura. Similarly, here also there is a fluid which is filled, which acts as the shock absorber and also helps in reducing the friction As you know, that heart keeps on pumping. So it may cause friction between the heart and the outer the parts which are present outside the heart. So it reduces. This helps in reduction of the friction. Now, the function of pericardium is to limit the cardiac distension and restrict excessive movement to protect and lubricate. The pericardium is composed of visceral pericardium, parietal pericardium, and the pericardial cavity. Now, the innermost layer of the heart is called as the endocardium. Now, the lines of the heart chambers and the valves are enclosed in the endocardium. It is made up of the smooth, thin lining to reduce the friction of the blood flow through the chambers. The cardiac conduction system is located in this layer. Now, myocardium. Myocardium is the middle between the pericardium and the endocardium. It is the thickest layer of the heart. There was a question in the NEET almost 3 years back, and the question was, which is the heart chamber which has the thickest myocardium? And the answer to this was left ventricle. Left ventricle is the chamber of the heart which has the thickest myocardium. Although ventricles as compared to atria, both of them have thicker wall as compared to the atria, because ventricles have blood under pressure as they have to supply blood out of the heart. Because you know that right ventricle supplies the blood to the lungs, while the left ventricle supplies the blood to the different parts of the body. So the blood is under high pressure in the ventricles. So to prevent the walls of this chambers from collapsing, the walls are thick walled. Now let's move on to the muscles. The muscle fibers are present in this myocardium. The contraction of this layer allows the blood to be pumped through the blood vessels. Now, heart is divided, as we discussed, into 4 chambers: the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. If you look at the diagram carefully, here also you can see the thick myocardium, and the thickest of it is present in the left ventricle. Here. So you can see the structure of heart here with the 2 right side chambers called as the right atrium and the right ventricle, and the 2 chambers on the left side called as the left atrium and the left ventricle. Now the upper chambers. On the upper side of the heart are the 2 chambers which are the right atria and the left atria. The right atrium. Now right atrium is the chamber of the heart which receives the blood from the vena cava. Now, vena cava is bringing the deoxygenated blood from all the body parts through the superior and the inferior vena cava into the right atrium. Now, the inferior vena cava is coming from the lower parts of the body, that is your lower torso. Torso is the main part of your body from which the appendages like your arms and your legs emerge. So from the lower torso and from the legs, the blood is carried through the inferior vena cava, while from the upper parts of the body, the blood is carried through the superior vena cava into the right atrium. From the right atrium, the blood moves on into the right ventricle. Now, left atrium. Left atrium is the chamber which receives the blood, and it receives the blood, oxygenated blood coming from the lungs through the pulmonary veins. The lower 2 chambers are the ventricles. The right ventricle receives the blood from the right atrium, while the left ventricle receives the blood from the left atrium. The right ventricle receives deoxygenated blood as the right atrium contracts, while the left ventricle receives the oxygenated blood as the left atrium contracts. Now, valves. Very important topic of this chapter, valves of the heart. Now, valves are located within the chambers of the heart. The functions of the valves. Now, valves control the direction of the blood flow so that it always flows only in one direction through the chambers, and from the heart to the body. Now, there are four main valves present in the heart: the tricuspid valve, the pulmonic or the pulmonary valve, the mitral valve, and the aortic valve. The mitral valve, as I told you, is also known as the bicuspid valve. The tricuspid valve. It is an atrioventricular valve. Atrioventricular means present between the atrium and the ventricle. As you can see here, it is present between the right atrium and the right ventricle. The tricuspid valve, because it consists of three cusps. Three flap-like structures are present in this valve, so it is called as the tricuspid valve. So the movement of blood from the right atrium into the right ventricle is controlled by this tricuspid valve. The mitral valve or the bicuspid valve consists of two flap-like structures. It is present between the left atrium and the left ventricle. Now, the easiest trick to remember which valve is present in which chambers is lab rat. Lab rat. Now, where lab stands for left atrium, bicuspid valve, lab. Similarly, rat stands for right atrium, has this tricuspid valve. So, lab. So, here you can see lab. That is, left atrium has the mitral or the bicuspid valve. And right atrium has the tricuspid valve. Next, we talk about the pulmonic or the pulmonary valve. The pulmonic valve or the pulmonary valve along with the aortic valve is also known as the semi-lunar valves because they are semi-lunar shaped valves. This pulmonic valve, I told you in previous chapter, the pulmon stands for lungs. So now you can understand this pulmonic will stand for anything, any blood vessel which is associated with the lungs. So here now you can see it controls the flow of blood from the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, the blood moves on into the lungs. So this semi-lunar valve, pulmonary valve, helps in controlling the blood flow between the right ventricle and the lungs. The aortic valve, I told you aortic valve is also another type of semi-lunar. Semi-lunar means half moon-shaped valve which controls the blood leaving the heart. So the blood which is now going to move through the aorta to the different body parts is controlled so that it does not backflow, is controlled with the help of this aortic valve. Now, this is the anatomy overview of the heart. So here, arc of aorta. In the previous chapter, we were discussing about this arc of aorta. So, the aorta has the ascending and the descending limbs, and in between is present the aortic arc. Then here, number 2, you can see the superior vena cava, which is bringing the blood to the heart, and also here, number 8, you can see the inferior vena cava. Then you can see the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery, which is bringing the blood from the lungs, and pulmonary veins, which are taking the blood to the lungs. Right atrium, you can see the right ventricle, the left atrium, the left ventricle. Between the right atrium and the right ventricle is present the tricuspid valve. Between the left atrium and the left ventricle is present the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. And then here, this you can see what is called as the aortic valve, which is present to prevent the backflow of blood into the right ventricle, which is going into the aorta. So that's all about the structure of heart. Have a good day, all of you. God bless you.